Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we are playing Green-Black TurboDepths, a deck that I play quite often on the channel. This is one of the decks I have in paper that I've played at some various tournaments, so I like to play this quite regularly on the channel and sort of update it. I am actually close to finishing the primer for this deck that's going to be available on my Patreon, but I'll let you all know when that goes up. So, what is this deck? This deck is a dedicated combo deck that aims to win the game by making a 20/20 indestructible flyer and beat your opponent with it in one swing. In order to do this, we have a Thespian stage, which can copy the Dark Depths, and because it doesn't have any counters on it, because it's an as it enters with counters thing, so the Thespian stage to state-based effects will then become a 20/20 when you sack it. The other way of doing that is a Vampire Hexmage, which can just remove all the counters from Dark Depths and give you a 20/20. In order to facilitate that, we have 8 tutors in the form of Crop Rotation and Sylvan Scrying. Crop Rotation obviously lets you grab things at instant speed, so it's useful for things like Sejiri Steppe to give your creature protection from a colour at instant speed, or Bojuka Bog to wipe a graveyard at instant speed. Sylvan Scrying can find your combo pieces. It can find other things you might want, like a Sejiri Steppe to push through blockers if you don't need it at instant speed, or a Ghost Quarter as an answer for something like a Caracas. Or it can find you one of these 2 Boseijus, which can blow up a problem land like Caracas, but can also hit things like Ensnaring Bridge and other problems you might be facing, including Blood Moon. Then we have the Disruption suite of the deck. So today we are playing 4 Thoughtseizes, which is normal for me, but we're playing an additional Duress. So we've gone up +1 Duress from the last list I played, so up to 3 Duresses now by cutting one of the Pithing Needles. This is because lately I've been seeing less Wasteland decks and more combo decks, so I wanted to reflect that in the deck a little bit and see how it played out. Effectively, the 4th Pithing Needle is a bit of a flex slot, as is the 4th Not of This World, but I'm going to be running 4 Not of This World today, because this is just a good way of saying no to removal or Caracas trigger or anything that's going to get in your way for a little bit. The Duress also, there's been a slight uptick in black decks playing Edict effects, so Duress is something that we can use to try and clear the way for our guy. That's our Disruption suite, and then we have some fast mana in the form of Elvish Spirit Guides and Lotus Petals. These can provide our colours, so even under Blood Moon we can use these to like Sylvan Scrying or Crop Rotate into a forest to make sure that we have the mana to then Sylvan Scrying and Boseiju to get rid of the Blood Moon and get our win off. So that's pretty nice too. Then we have the actual colour of the deck. So Boseiju is a useful land that can also blow stuff up. So this is making green mana, so it's going to be able to cast our important spells as well as being an important thing that we can get to blow up problem permanents. The actual mana base here, we have 1 forest and 1 swamp, so we can play around Blood Moon effects a little bit. This is more important from the sideboard, but just having a Verdant Catacombs as your first land drop is really useful because your opponent can't wasteland you. Then you can have the requisite amount of mana for the second turn if that's going to be useful for you. Alright, that's pretty much it for the main deck. Let's have a little chat about the sideboard. We have the extra Duress here, so we can go up to 4 Duresses. There's a lot of combo in the field at the moment. You can die pretty fast in Legacy. We want to be able to take out the decks that go underneath us, because we're quite fast, but some decks are faster. The Leyline in the Void, some of the decks that are faster are graveyard decks, right? Whether that's Cephalid Breakfast that can clock us, or things like Reanimator, which definitely can clock us. So this is helpful for those. So we've got the 4 Leylines. It's just the best piece of graveyard hate you can get. And also, we don't really care about drawing cards that much. Our opening hand should have a path to victory in it. So we're not going to get jammed up by drawing a Leyline as much as some other decks might. Then we have 2 Collector Ouphe. This is obviously for things like 8-cast and Painter, but where it also really shines for us is, again, these combo decks that are fast. We can drop this Collector Ouphe and shut off all of the Lotus Petals and stuff like that. Now, we'll still be keeping our Lotus Petals in because we're going to use these to power out the turn 1 Collector Ouphe, which can hopefully sort of put the nails in a Storm deck and give us that few turns we need to deploy a 20/20 and swing. We have a Singleton Gaia's Blessing. This is basically just a free card that we can play to buy us a lot more time against Painter decks, which seems pretty good. It makes them into a 3-card combo deck instead of a 2-card combo deck, and that should be more than enough time for us to get the 20/20 all up in their business. And lastly, we have 3 Steely Resolve. If our opponent is trying to interact with our deck by killing the Marit Lays using things like instant speed Flicker Wisps, Solitudes, Swords to Plowshares, Brazen Borrowers, that sort of thing, if that's how they're going to interact with it, then we can have a Steely Resolve. Now, I wouldn't bring this in just for Brazen Borrowers, but some of the blue-white decks have Brazen Borrowers and all of the white removal. So Steely Resolve is just really good for that. You name Avatar, they can't kill your stuff. Also, against Cephalid Breakfast, you name Wizard, they can't target their Cephalid Illusionist because it's Shroud, not Hexproof. Alright, so just a little recap of the changes from the last video I played. It's -1 Pithing Needle, +1 Duress in the main, and it's -2 Collector Ouphe, +1 Duress, +1 Gaea's Blessing in the sideboard. And that's it. Alright, before we jump into a league with this, let me just say likes, comments, and new subscribers is really good. It helps the channel out, it doesn't cost you anything. If you're in a position to financially help, you can become a member of the channel, or you can join my Patreon, which soon I'm going to have a Patreon tier that's going to give you access to a primer for this deck, which really delves deep into the ins and outs and why certain cards are in, why certain cards are out, how to tweak for metagames, and so on and so forth. Right, with that said, it's quite a big introduction really. Let's play some Legacy. We're on the draw here. This hand gives us a turn 3 Marit Lage with protection. So we can have Urborg. So turn 1 we Urborg. Turn 2 we... Alternatively, actually, we can go turn 1 Verdant Catacombs and then turn that into a Thespian stage. Turn 2 Urborg, cast the Sylvan Scrying for Dark Depths. Turn 3 play it. That's 3 turns where we're vulnerable to Wasteland and we don't have any disruption. I think we can do better, so we're going to mulligan. This hand has some disruption. It has access to one half of the combo, which is the harder half of the combo to find. But we don't have a game plan that actually wins us the game here. We will be relying on draws, so I think we can mulligan again. This hand is relying on us to draw a land, which is a lot more reasonable than some of the other things we've been relying on. So I think we'll keep this. 2 of these cards have got to go. I think we'll get rid of one of the Hexmages and one of the Not of This Worlds. Now, there's an argument for keeping 2 Hexmages in case we get Thoughtseize, but if we get Thoughtseize, they're probably taking the Scrying. Alright. If our opponent is on Reanimator, we'd probably lose this game anyway. How bad is it going to be? They could be like a Death Shadow scam type deck. Or like the Grixis deck I played probably yesterday I put up on the channel for you guys. So I imagine we're losing the Sylvan Scrying or the Thoughtseize depending on the texture of our opponent's hand. The Thoughtseize. Okay. What information is our opponent going to give us here? A Verdant Catacombs. This strikes me very much as a Reanimate deck. So here's a bad land. We're probably going to see a Faithless Looting. Oh no, just an Entomb. Interesting. Do they have anything to follow up with? They do. A Lotus Petal into a Reanimate on Grizzlebrand. We can still beat this, but it's going to be very tricky. If we get hit by another piece of discard, we probably aren't going to win this game. So they'll take our Scrying. Or our Hexmage, which are sort of the 2 routes. Alright, our opponent's going to have to go to clean up. They're probably going to discard a big monster and put it into play next turn and kill us. Seems very unreasonable. There's an Archon of Cruelty. So we have the Urborg. So we can play the Urborg out. If we draw a... No, we're just going to die to this Archon of Cruelty, right? They must be able to put it into play. Let's not waste anyone's time here. Okay, so sideboard-wise, we've got some good tools for this. We have these 4 Leyline of the Voids. Now, you could make an argument for bringing in Gaea's Blessing because you can target the cards that get shuffled in. This costs 2 mana. That might be a little bit too expensive. We're not really going to have to worry about Not of This World in this matchup. That's not what it's about. That's a pretty clean 4 for 4. It's almost like somebody planned this deck nicely. We can drop out Pithing Needle for a Duress, just to have more ways of interacting with our opponent, and we can have the graveyard covered and also mess with the show and tell part of the deck. I don't think we want the Gaea's Blessing here. I think we are just on the Leyline of the Void plan, plus discard. We could take out a Pithing Needle, but we're going to try and use these Pithing Needles for Grizzlebranding just in case things go wrong. I don't think we want the Blessing here. Alright, so we've won the die roll. We have our Leyline. We have a Sylvan Scrying we can fire off for a Dark Depths on turn 1 and have both of our lands that we require. I think this is fine. We will keep this hand. We are trying to draw 1 more mana source here. Put this into play. So there is an argument here for getting a land that casts one of our spells. I'm definitely playing out the Lotus Petal here. So we can Sylvan Scrying here. I think we have to do that. The thing we get won't be able to be removed either. So I think we're just going to get the Dark Depths because this is the hardest thing for us to get hold of. This can't be discarded from our hand, but the crop rotation can, which means that we would lose access to another land. But we just need, at the moment, if we draw another land that taps for green, then we can turn it into a Yavimaya, and then we're ready to go. Or into a Urborg, which might be better. Let's see what our opponent's got for us. They could play a Serenity this turn. or we're just going to get hit by show and tell. If we get hit by a show and tell, there's actually an interesting choice of whether or not we put the Pithing Needle or the Dark Depths in, because the Pithing Needle can name Grizzlebrand and shut down their ability to draw 7. They might not have the show and tell. I think he probably would have slammed it by now if they had it. Okay, they're evoking Grief. So, they had the Dark Ritual, so they could have just hardcast this. It would have used up one of their Lotus Petal to hardcast the Grief. So they're clearly trying to work out if the show and tell is going to be good, I think. That's the impression I'm getting here. Okay, I took the crop rotation. Interesting. They're cracking the marsh flats in response to the Grief. So this means our opponent might have a wear tear, and they're going to tear or wear. I can never remember which one it is. Is it tear? It's tear, yeah. So they're going to get rid of this so that their Grief goes into the graveyard. And then they can reanimate this if they want to on turns coming up. Now, we just need to make sure that we can get a 2020 going. So I think we play this out. There's definitely options here. We could name like a fetch land or something, but I think we're best off naming Grizzlebrand. I think that's the thing where it goes wrong most easily. Now, if we can draw a Yavimaya or an Urborg, so that's 5 cards that we can draw that make us a 2020 next turn. Alternatively, we can just draw some lands. So we're going to get Thoughtseize here and probably lose the Duress. I don't think they're going to take the Leyline at this stage of the game. No reanimation spellbooks. They kept the pieces. Okay, so now we have a Thespian stage. All we need is any mana source now. So the majority of our deck makes us a 2020 now. So we're looking for Spirit Guide, Lotus Petal, any of our lands, apart from another Dark Depths. A crop rotation. That does not do it. Alright. And Entomb. What are we going to get struck with here? Archon of Cruelty is probably the best thing they can get here, because that allows them to make us sacrifice a Dark Depths if we have to make it at sorcery speed for some reason. Atraxa, sure, they've just gone for a new way of filling their hand. This also can gain them life, which will buy them a turn from the Dark Depths. So they can block for a turn, gain some life, and then play an Archon of Cruelty. So we are very far behind here. Let's see what we have. Sarah's Emissary, Echoing Truth is pretty strong here as well. Archon of Cruelty, can they realistically cast that? They've got 2 mana, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they need 2 more mana to hardcast this. But they can Thoughtseize. No, they don't have any actual reanimation. Oh, they got reanimate here actually. So they can play the Badlands, unmask themselves, reanimate. Yeah, feels like our opponent should be able to get there with this. Actually, no, they can't unmask and reanimate because they're both sorceries. What do they have? They chose Archon of Cruelty, Badlands, and Tomb Reanimate. So they not want to take the Echoing Truth. Okay, so that was probably one of the worst. There's quite a few draws that aren't great for us. The majority of the draws are good for us, but some of them are just really bad. So we've kind of got either our draw wins us the game or it does nothing. But most of the cards we can draw do win us the game. Alright, so they've got this Faithless Looting, so they can pitch the Archon of Cruelty, put it into play now. I don't think we can beat Archon of Cruelty if it comes into play this turn, which it will do. So I think we'll just scoop this one up. Yeah, this is why we have Leylines and stuff, but sometimes we're just not going to get there. We needed to draw another land a little bit earlier, and I think we'd be in a better spot there. Oh, if we'd have winning the die roll was also pretty important for our opponent there, because their deck is much better on the play than it is on the draw. Alright, let's go to round 2. We have lost the die roll, but we have a turn 2 2020 with Wasteland Protection. This is keepable. If we get Thoughtseized, it's not going to be amazing for us. So we can take the Hexmage, but at least we have the Dark Depths, which is usually the hardest part of the combo to assemble. A Volcanic Island. Delver or Ponder? It's a Delver, sure. Let's play out this Pithing Needle. Is this worth a daze to you? It is not. Right, we have a Wasteland there. So they can counterspell our Vampire Hexmage. So depending on what we draw, we might be incentivized to play it around a daze. Delver didn't flip, which means we have the time to play it around a daze. Another Delver, sure. So these can chump block for a turn as well. But they have one card in their deck usually that can interact with the 2020, which is the Brazen Borrower. Got the Cracking a Tarn in their second main phase. They've got Dragon's Rage Channeler as well. More guys. A Ponder, sure. So they're going to set up their Delvers to flip next turn. Unless the top of their deck is really bad. Yep, they didn't shuffle. So these are both flipping next turn. Another Hexmage. Okay, this means we can just slam it this turn and see what happens. I have to imagine if they have a counter spell, it's going on this a daze. Sure, we will not pay, but we get to make the same play next turn, and perhaps we can draw some piece of interaction as well, like a Thoughtseize. We could jam that down, or we could try like a Not of This World to keep our guy alive. But we can take 6 this turn. Our clock should be sufficient here. Ponder from our opponent. This means we're not going to have an additional Murktide coming in, but they could have another threat like a Delver or Dragon's Rage Channeler. Dragon's Rage Channeler will not be delirious yet, but it will be closer. If one of these Insectile Aberrations dies to, let's say, chump blocking a 20/20, then they'll have a delirious Dragon's Rage Channeler. Alright, so now it will be delirious if they find it. They did not shuffle off their Ponder either. An extra card here. This time we get to play around the days if we want to. So let's try again. Black, black. Let's try a Hexmage. Have a Force of Will. Okay, we're in with the Hexmage. So if they attack, we can make the 20/20 on blocks. Our opponent hasn't shown us white mana. Okay, they've played a land, so they definitely won't have white mana here. Do they have their one-of Brazen Borrower? Sometimes they have it and they kill you, sometimes they don't. Sure, they had their one-of Petty Theft. Alright, so we take 6 this turn. We take 9 this turn. That's going to put us to being pretty dead pretty soon. Thespian stage, so we are 1 mana off of making the 20/20 now, so we can't get both these into play. If we'd have drawn this the previous turn and been able to play it instead of the Bayou, we could just make a 20/20 again, and that might be enough here. But as it is, it's not. Alright, not a great start so far. Let's see if we can change things around. So there's a bunch of cards that I like here. Leyline is very good at slowing your opponent down, but not always the be-all and end-all. The Duresses are okay here, but I don't know if we want more of them, to be honest. I think we could probably trim on one of our Duresses. Let's see what lands we want to get rid of here. We don't really want to get rid of any of these. You can't really remove the Boseiju because it's an important piece of green mana. Ghost Quarter can hit the Wastelands if you need to play around them and don't have access to a Pithing Needle. Sejiri Steppe can give us a bit of protection as well. So it's basically options of how you want to slow your opponent down in this matchup. So we can try and slow them down with things like Abrupt Decays, or we can slow them down with things like Leyline in the Void, but we don't really get to do both. So we'll take away one of these Duresses. That gives us room for 2 Leylines. And then I don't think we want to trim a Duress. Probably get rid of a Lotus Petal here for another Leyline. And maybe a Spirit Guide to trim a little bit on the mana. We could bring in some Abrupt Decays here. I don't mind trimming a couple of Not of This World for a couple of Decays. I think that's fine. We don't really want to overboard very much. Just Not of This World depends how many bounce spells they have. Depends on if we want this. I think I'd rather let's have one of the Duresses back in and the 3rd Decay. Let's try this. Because we've only really seen Delvers out of our opponent. We don't know much of the rest of their deck. Well, this certainly does some stuff, doesn't it? We'll keep this. Start this in play. Should start our opponent down nicely. Now we have an interesting choice here. We can play the Urborg out, but if it gets snapped up by a Wasteland, that's going to be really bad for us. So I think we're going to play the Swamp first. It's going to mean we're going to be slightly slower, but we're going to have a little bit more ability to sort of flex around here. Right, that's a pretty reasonable draw. So we have options here. We can play our Thespian stage, or we can play our Urborg. Then go for the Urborg, because if this gets Wastelanded, that doesn't really matter that much. And we're holding up Abrupt Decay because we have the Elvish Spirit Guide here. If we have something that requires us to pop it. Because the only threats they're going to have here, realistic threats anyway, is Delver and the Brazen Borrower. And they're not going to play Brazen Borrower as a threat if they can avoid it. We will have to try and jam past Petty Theft at some point though. It's kind of what we're hoping to draw some discard for. Now as long as our opponent doesn't put threat in play, we can take a little bit of time, but the more time we take, the more our opponent can sculpt. Okay, so we can play out this Dark Depths. We can have black black here and cast this. We can play around the days. They could have Submerged, but we don't have a forest in play, which is why I'd rather not play this Verdant Catacombs. Because I don't really want to put a forest in play in case they have the one of Submerge. This might get a... Okay, it didn't get any action. So if our opponent doesn't play anything on their turn, then we're incentivized to just hold this up and attack for 2. We can get a lightning bolt here. They showed us the lightning bolt. I think we will hit this now to dodge wastelands. They could stifle here, which would be annoying, but we do have a Thespian stage coming. Now they could have their other petty theft, which would be annoying. A Thoughtseize. I guess we'll take a look. They got their other petty theft again. Now they might have more than one of these in their deck, but usually this is a one-off in Delver decks. So what do we have here? No threats. Do we care about any of these cards realistically? The Surgical Extraction can take out all of our Dark Depths, so we probably have to hit that. I don't know why they didn't use this on our Dark Depths. So now we have an interesting choice. I think we just play out the... We can play out the stage, and if they do a Wasteland, we can turn it into a basic swamp using our Spirit Guide. It does go shields down on our Abrupt Decay. But it's not going super well for us right now. There's the Ponder we know about. So we have a removal spell if they play out the Brazen Borrower. I think what they probably want to just do is drop a land here and just Brazen Borrower us, but slowly have a beatdown going. So obviously the longer this game goes on, the more my deck is designed to go and find the thing we're looking for. Now they obviously have a lot of cantrips that can get them there, but they've already found the best card in this matchup in the Brazen Borrower. We don't need to do the Thespian stage into the swamp. Maybe we can bait out our Wasteland if our opponent makes a mistake. We can play out a Bayou here, but it will turn on Submerge, so I don't really want to play out that Bayou. We could play a 2-2, but we've seen they've got a bunch of removal in hand that will hit it, so not worth it. Especially this Unholy Heat, which only hits the Elvish Spirit Guide. It doesn't hit anything else in our deck. I guess it can hit the Hexmage, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. So this is going to be the Borrower. That's fine. They're cracking this immediately. What have we got? Right, let's go and get a basic forest. So the biggest threat they can deploy under a Leyline is a 3-power guy, so we may as well kill the 3-power guy that's there right now. There's a Ponder. So our crop rotation is very unlikely to resolve with a minor misstep there, but the days shouldn't really prove much of a problem for our spells we're casting. Feels like they probably have something along the lines of a Force of Will at this point. Bayou. So because we already have the forest out now, I think we're going to play out this Bayou with the intention of just having enough mana to push through any amount of days as our opponent can muster. We don't really have a way of winning this game yet. But the second Marit Lage should be good enough as a general rule. A Delver of Secrets. A Dragon's Rage Channeler. A Preordain. A Wasteland. Alright. So snap this off. They're doing this on our Thespian state. We're going to copy this forest. We have another Urborg, so we don't really care about that. But this protects it from future Wastelands. We were kind of hoping our opponent would try and Wasteland it and we could get the Wasteland out of them for free, but isn't what happened. I think we'll play out this Urborg. We'll jam this just to make sure that our opponent doesn't get any chance of going in the graveyard. They can usually remove one of these maybe. They might have brought in a second Borrower, for example, but they're unlikely to have a way of removing 2 of them. So the Dragon's Rage Channel will always be a 1-1 in this game, but the Delver of Secrets is going to be a 3-2 because they did some Brainstorm shenanigans last turn, and they've been scrying with the Preordain and the DRC. So 4. So this is a 5-turn clock, but they have a Lightning Bolt, so it's a 4-turn clock. Additional Lightning Bolts will change that. We need to find something. Our spells are unlikely to resolve. Our opponent's showing us Hardcast Force. Okay, this buys us a lot of turns of drawing things. Do we want to play out this Bayou? Doesn't make a difference. I don't think we need it in hand. But we've got Abrupt Decay to hit the Insectile Aberration. There's a Wasteland. So this isn't going to be able to hit our Thespian stage anymore. Let's hit the Aberration. I don't like the way they've been using these Wastelands, because if they hold it up, we can't do anything with the Dark Depths until we find a way of dealing with the Wasteland. They can always crack it off if we play... Okay, so this is a thing that's not going to resolve, because we know our opponent's got a minor misstep in hand. So we're going to save this and try and double spell with it in a little while. try and force multiple things through in the same turn. If our opponent plays a 6th land, they can hardcast Force and Misstep. We don't know how many of these cards are still in our opponent's hand. Sylvan Scrying. This is not going to resolve, but we need to work through these forces and things. If they pitch the Misstep, then we might be able to crop rotate. Just a hardcast Force. Sure. So now they can't Misstep. So now we will crop rotate this Bayou away and get ourselves the Dark Depths. So our opponent can wasteland, so we're going to make this... Where do they put that card? Puts one card on top of their library. I think we're supposed to we're supposed to do it now. This way they can't wasteland it. And the double spelling meant they couldn't do the minor misstepping. Do they have a second Brazen Borrower or a Submerge in their deck? Alright, they don't. Okay, so we managed to fight our way through that one. On the play, on the draw, things are a little bit different. And the Abrupt Decay has become more relevant, I think. Because we're more likely to be on the back foot. So I think we'll take out a Decay here. But I'd also like a Duress. So we're just going to strip out some of our fast mana there. Which, as you saw, we're trying to slow down the game a little bit here. So that's kind of our game plan. Like there's... Oh, I've submitted 61 there by accident. Whoops. So there's a lot of ways you can approach this matchup. What do we have? We don't really have what we want here, do we? I think we can do better than this. Leyline into like Thoughtseize and stuff. Is that good? No, it's not. We need to find a way of actually making our stuff. I think this is the best of the bunch so far. So what do we need to keep here? Probably Catacombs. 2 of these cards have got to go. We can't really afford to get rid of the thing that gives us our combo, which is awkward. So I think we're having to get rid of a Decay here, and possibly the Needle, and we're going to try and bait them into using a Wasteland, and we'll crop rotate when they do that. Not an amazing plan, but it's the plan we're going with. Sometimes our deck mulligans quite a lot. That's the problem when you have a deck that just does one thing, and we're not trying to just play good cards, we're trying to do a very specific thing. Oh, that's quite a nice one. So we're going to lead out on this Bayou. If our opponent wants to wasteland this, then we can crop rotate it into an Urborg and try for a Hexmage next turn. We can get hit by double wasteland, but that's just a thing we have to try. Alright, so here's the exact sequence that I predicted when I kept this opening hand. Now do you want to try and interact with our crop rotation? That puts our opponent in a bit of a bind. Force of Will pitching Third Path Iconoclast. Sure. So we ended up one card up on this exchange, and we didn't actually need... Well, they're going to hit the crop rotation. Interesting. They should have won the last game if they'd have just surgicaled our Dark Depths as soon as it hit the bin, to be honest, but... Alright. I'm going to take one from the Delver here. Our opponent's only got 2 cards left in hand. That's a pretty good one. So if we play out a Thespian stage this turn, and then Dark Depths next turn, that doesn't really get us anywhere, but we can play out this Verdant Catacombs this turn, then play out the Hexmage, plus we keep this in hand so our opponent doesn't know about it, so we can play this and the Hexmage next turn and try and get the depths off, and if that doesn't work, we can try and Thespian stage. The other option is we can try the line that doesn't go through the stack and just uses our lands. We've got a few turns of this guy pecking away at us that we can put up with. What we don't want to see is a Murktide, because that changes the clock dramatically. So, we have some options here. We can just try and play out Hexmage here. Let's try and play the Hexmage. They might daze this. So we'll go and get the basic swamp here. So we haven't played a land yet this turn. But as soon as this comes into play, we get priority and we can play the depths. But if this doesn't resolve, we might want to play the Thespian stage instead. Let's see what they're going to go with here. It might just be a hard cast daze. Sure, hard cast daze. Opponent's got 1 card in hand. We're going to play out the Thespian stage because the actual depths is more of a prize and we've got a little bit of life to work with. Our opponent's got 1 card in hand. They're drawing off the top. They haven't done any filtering. It's only a matter of time before they draw a cantrip and get to course correct with what they're drawing. Okay, so we've drawn another Vampire Hexmage. Sure. We're going to play this guy out now. And this way we have 2 routes to a 2020 next turn. One of which, so we can do it around a wasteland by having both of these in play. Sylvan Scrying. Does that change anything here? I don't think so. We'll see what our opponent has in terms of what they do with their Delver. If they attack with their Delver this turn and just go to end step, then it means they have something. If they hold the Delver back to block, it means they don't have anything. Let's see what this Delver does. Alright, they're attacking with the Delver. I think we're going to take 3 here. We died to double bolt with this plan. So we can make the 2020 now, and then also make a 2020 next turn. If we use the Thespian stage and leave the Hexmage around, so we can Sylvan Scrying for a Dark Depths here. We're going to attacks. Petty Theft. They got 1 card in hand, so the 1 card that beats us here is Daze. Do they have the Daze? They've done no brainstorming or pondering this game. They have a Surgical Extraction on the Dark Depths. Sure, so they did have 2 Surgical Extraction in their sideboard. Alright, so can we win this race? We take 3 this turn. Do any of these provide us any utility right now? We can't blow up anything with any of these lands. We can Bojuka Bog. Let's play this, stop a Murktide coming into play. Although they've shown us Third Path Iconoclast, so I don't know how many Murktides they're going to have. So we need to draw another Abrupt Decay. I don't like that fetch land there. I think if you're doing a Brainstorm or a Ponder, you have a lot more utility of just having the land in your deck. So we're going to take 3 this turn, then they're going to play this. So actually that doesn't work for us. We're not going to be able to do it with an Abrupt Decay either, are we? No, I don't think so. They play another Delver, and they've got... So okay, so they've just got loads of threats here. They're just doing this so that they can F6, I guess. Save themselves some time. If they block here... actually, they can't block with a Borrower, so they can't mess this up. Yeah, we're done here. Oh, I was unlucky. Our opponent didn't do any manipulation or cantripping, but they just happened to have all the answers they needed all the time. Sometimes that happens. I don't think we could try and just sit there and wait for more answers. So, yeah. Our opponent had 1 card in hand, and it had to be either of the Days or the Surgical, and we just got hit by it. Unfortunate, but such is life sometimes. Let's go on to round 3. Alright, we want our first die roll. This hand is a lot nicer than the ones we've been having. We don't have any green mana, but if we draw any mana source, we do get to make our thing without having to use anything that can be counterspelled. So we'll keep this. And we do have to Thoughtseize turn 1 because there's a lot of decks that can kill you turn 1 Legacy these days, so we don't want to be sleeping on it. Okay, our opponent is mulligan to 6. Basic Swamp into Thoughtseize. Let's see what our opponent is working with. Force of Will. Pitching Ponder, just to protect the hand. Alright, this makes me think my opponent is on Doomsday, and they have a turn 1 Doomsday they can cast. That's the impression I'm getting right now. Let's see. Underground Sea. Personal Tutor, this gets them a Doomsday. Understood. My perfect read on why they would Force of Will then has come to fruition. A Boseiju. Unfortunately, we don't have a second green for this. I'm just trying to think what we could do here. If we... we could maybe use this next turn to do something. We're in a bit of a weird spot here, unfortunately. So we need to get 3 lands into play over the course of 2 turns. So this turn we can Sylvan Scrying. That doesn't really work, does it, for what we're trying to do? So we could play Boseiju, crop rotate it into Yavimaya, then cast Sylvan Scrying. That doesn't get us anywhere. We still need to put both of these into play. It's tough. I don't know how we're going to win this. We could Ghost Quarter our opponent's Underground Sea right now and see if that just completely cuts the rug out from underneath them. I think we have to sacrifice our black source here. Where is our Ghost Quarter? So if our opponent wants their land, they have to shuffle it away. Okay. It's a May. They don't have to shuffle here. They have shuffled. So shuffle the Doomsday off the top of their deck. All right. So we may have bought ourselves some turns. They just have it anyway. Okay, they're going to Thoughtseize us and take our Scrying. But we do have the ability to make our thing in a few turns. Do they have Dark Ritual Doomsday? That would have been real awkward, but what do we have here? A Dark Depths. Put a Thespian stage here. So we're playing it in a way that we can draw a mana accelerant to go off a turn early. But if we don't draw another land, we go off a turn late. Okay, so here we've drawn the mana accelerant to go off a turn early, which is why we played this rather than the Sejiri Steppe and just play these two out. So now we have a 20/20 at our opponent's end step. And they're very unlikely to have any way of interacting with this. Doomsday sometimes runs a singleton Brazen Borrower though. We got a Brainstorm here. They're using their Lotus Petal so they can maximize the power of the Brainstorm with their fetch land, which probably means their hand isn't great. Let's make a 20/20. That's what we came here to do. Alright, I didn't have anything. Doomsday. Not a great matchup, but we have slightly more for it now because we have the Duresses. So in the previous list, I think I had 2 Duress. Now we have a 3rd Duress, so that's good. Not of this world, not the most useful. The Gaia's Blessing weirdly can come in kind of clutch at times because you can shuffle cards in response to their Thassa's Oracle and just get them. We only saw black sources, which means that they're probably not going to have the white removal that the Esper build has, which is nice. We did see Flooded Strands, but they only ever fetched Underground Seas as far as we saw. We're going to keep these Pithing Needles in because they can name Street Wraith. Our opponent could have something like a Sheoldred. We don't really have a way of beating that other than just being bigger than it. But we don't really draw extra cards, so that's kind of fine. I think we do need our fast mana here. There is an option of bringing the Collector Ouphe because it slows down their petals and lines our diamonds. But I don't think that's worth it. I think that's a bit of a false idea there. We're just going to have our 4 Duresses in alongside our 4 Thoughtseize and maybe get a cheeky Gaia's Blessing in the works. We've got a couple of Not of This World because our opponent can Brazen Borrow. That's not really what we're about. So our hand can make a 20/20 because we can search for it here. And we have a Thoughtseize that we can use to try and punch a hole. But we have to get to our first turn. Doomsday can be a turn 1 kill deck. So they can Brainstorm here as well if we Thoughtseize them. Crop rotation. Alright. I'm liking all these additional ways of making our things. We don't really care about what our opponent's doing to our mana. That's unlikely to be a way they try and win the game here. But we are interested in what we're going to be crop rotating away. I think we can get a Bayou here though. Let's Thoughtseize our opponent. This could be a Daze to protect from our opponent, but that sets them back another turn. They didn't do anything with their first turn. The most likely outcome here is a Brainstorm to protect their Doomsday plus mana acceleration. Okay, they're doing a Daze here instead. Sure, that's fine. Just sets them back a turn. They do have the blue mana, so they can Brainstorm. Okay, they're not doing anything. So we're just going to reset the game, but I'm going to start off a land ahead now. But we don't have a Thoughtseize in hand anymore. There's a Ponder. So I think we're looking at Yavimaya into Sylvan Scrying this turn, most likely. Unless we draw something that changes our mind. They shuffle their library off the Ponder. That's good news for us. Another crop rotation. I think the play here is... what is the best play here? We could just like Boseiju their land away. Because they tend to only run 1 island in these decks. I quite like that as a strategy. Right. I'm going to play out the Yavimaya. This gives us the option of Boseijuing or crop rotationing. We could cast our Boseiju, activate our Boseiju straight away, or we could wait until our opponent tries to cast a personal tutor. I think that's probably the better one because we can force them to lose their land or their Doomsday. Like we did in the first one with our... Alright, this could give them a free shuffle if we do it, so we're more inclined to want to crop rotate here. Our opponent does have a lot of cards in hand though. I'm pretty confident this Boseiju is going to be a strip mine though. Okay, there's an Underground Sea. There's a Doomsday. Okay. So we have different ways that we can approach this once our opponents resolve their Doomsday. We can Boseiju away their islands and then crop rotate into a Ghost Quarter and hope that's enough of their mana gone. Or we can end of turn crop rotate for a Dark Depths and then make a 20/20. But that has to mean that we assume our opponent can't win with a pass the turn pile when they've got 4 cards in hand. That seems incredibly unlikely to me. They're not going to have made a pile that requires them to pass a turn twice, I don't think. So we're going to go for the Boseiju line on their... It probably is on their island. I don't actually think it matters, though, because the Ghost Quarter can hit either one. But we'll have a look at what our opponent's sideboard as well, in case we lose this one and have to go to game 3. Also, if we see our opponent's thing and there's like no Lotus Petals in their exile zone, it means that this Boseiju line isn't going to be very useful aside from shuffling our opponent's pile. So we might just have to do the make a 20/20 line and maybe hope to draw a bit of fast mana, because then we can activate Boseiju for 1 if we have our Merit Legion play. Okay, let's have a look what we have here. So there is 1 Lotus Petal, 2 Lotus Petal, 1 Lion's Eye Diamond. Okay. How many cantrips? How many... 1 Edge of Autumn. I don't see any Street Wraiths here. Oh, there's a 3rd Lotus Petal, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, so our line should just win the game for us, I believe, if we can resolve our 2 spells. So we will hit this one, and then we'll crop rotate for our Ghost Quarter. Okay, cycling the Edge of Autumn. Sure. All right. A Lotus Petal. Does that change anything for us? I don't think it does. I think we go green, crop rotate this away. So these builds tend to usually run 3 Lotus Petals, not the full 4. They're cycling a Street Wraith. They cycled into a counterspell. I do know we have Ghost Quarter lines, so they might have planned around it. We'll see if they're on a 4 or 3 Lotus Petal build in a second. Force of Negation. Okay. So because we have Yavimaya, we can cast this Sylvan Scrying to get a Ghost Quarter. If this doesn't work, we can play a land and then crop rotate it. So we're getting many bites at the Ghost Quarter cherry. Force of Will. Pitching another thing, sure. They know they can't beat the Ghost Quarter line here. I think that's what that says to me. So let's go and get our Ghost Quarter. So they've got 2 cards left in their library, which means they have Cavern of Souls or some sort of mana source and a Thassa's Oracle. So we won that game without a 20/20. That doesn't happen very often, but we got there. And we got the match out of it. So this is kind of an interesting match because the Doomsday's decks, obviously, you can attack their mana in a certain fashion, but it has to work like this. Like there's lots of times where I've chased it and it hasn't worked, but sometimes they're forced into slower lines to play around potential wasteland, but we managed to get there here. All right, we're on the board. Let's go to round 4. Right, we've won a die roll, but we don't get to cast any spell. Well, we get to cast 2 spells if you include Lotus Petal, so we can't really keep this one. This one does not find a Dark Depths. We can't keep it. This one does find a Dark Depths, but it has issues. Let's keep this one. If we don't want the Sejiri Steppe, we have to keep a Lotus Petal. So we're going to get rid of a Steppe and a Scrying here. And we're going to lead out the game with an Urborg. And if we get Wastelanded, it's going to be very sad for us. That's what our opponent's working with over there. Ponder, Ponder, Nibble Mongoose, Tarmogoyf. All right. A good deck for good people. I love a bit of Nibble Mongoose. I think I trophied with it last week on the channel. It's good. Oh, they drew the Wasteland off the top. Ah. Oh dear, oh dear. We know we can resolve this spell to get us a Dark Depths now, so we're going to do it. There's a lot that can go wrong from this position. And a lot has already gone wrong. We got Wastelanded. Right, Polluted Delta. We're probably going to see a Tropical Island into Nimble Mongoose this turn. It could be a Ponder, but I think I would like the Nimble Mongoose as well. Get something on the board and then start disrupting a little bit. Okay, so we've drawn a Thespian's Stage. So we have 2 stages here. We could have played out the Dark Depths, but I don't want to expose it to a Wasteland when we're not facing a particularly strong clock right now. Obviously, the Tarmogoyf can certainly add to the board and add some pressure. We've got a few turns here. Like, no Wasteland this turn either, so... sorry, no Ponder this turn. And no Wasteland because they played land for the turn. It's a second Goose, I suspect. So if we draw an Urborg, we're punished for not playing this out. But if this got Wastelanded, then our entire route to victory was gone. Okay, so we can play this one out. And then next turn we can play this out and make a guy. We lose to Brazen Borrower, but again, it's a one-of in these decks at most in the main deck. Depending on how old school our opponent's deck is, they might have some number of Submerge. That used to be a more heavily played card once upon a time. Okay, not a Wasteland. That's good for us. We're going to make a 20/20 in our opponent's upkeep to dodge Wastelands. Now, if they have a Brazen Borrower, then so be it. Sometimes they get you, right? We take our 1 damage from the Mongoose. And on the Mongoose, it's got 4 cards in hand. Now our opponent can... Okay, this crop rotation, does that change anything? I don't think so. I'm going to crack this now. Get a Bayou. Do we get Bayou or do we get Forest? I think we get a Bayou, because if we need to rebuild, that's going to be more useful. So, do we make it now? We can wait a turn and try and find a green source to protect it with the crop rotation, but that's going to play into counter spells that we haven't really been playing into. So I think we're just supposed to make it now and dodge the Wasteland. They can stifle us here. But all Stifle does is stop this for 1 turn, then we untap and go again. Alright, they didn't have it. Sure. So now we go to sideboarding. So, Leyline of the Void shuts down pretty much all of their threats. And I quite like the Abrupt Decays, and I want the Duress. These games tend to go a little bit slower. It's going to be trimming these. We're going to be trimming some mana. We've got 3 cards to trim. We can't really get rid of any of these. I guess we could trim a Ghost Quarter and rely on our Pithing Needles a little bit. Since we're playing a slower game, I don't hate that. And we could trim a little bit more of our mana. Just try and play for a slightly longer game. So we can Leyline of the Void away Mongoose and Murktides. What does this hand do? This does find us a Sylvan Scrying. We have a bit of way of playing around potential Brazen Borrowers or Submerges. We won't have a Forest actually, so we won't even have to worry about Submerge. Right, we can even lead out on a Swamp here. Again, the game's going to be a little bit slower, so I'd rather play a game that doesn't... that's a slightly slower game, especially since they didn't play a threat on turn 1. I'd rather be doing, like, instead of playing the Urborg out here, because if this gets countered and we had the Urborg, then we're in trouble. We get to ignore Wastelands now, unless they brought in removal for artifacts, which I don't think is where you want to be in this matchup, to be honest. So our opponent keep a 1-lander. Alright, their 1-lander is probably pretty good then. That's usually what that means. So we can play out a Boseiju here. I don't really want to do that. Feels like we're going to get dazed. I don't want our Sylvan Scrying to get dazed, but I don't mind if a Hexmage gets dazed. So we're going to get this guy on the board. They didn't play a land on their first turn. Alright, so yes, they're dazing this. That's fine. We played this out to get through the daze because you want to try and make sure our Sylvan Scrying resolves, because getting the Dark Depths is the real important part of this deck. You can usually find something to go with the Dark Depths. There's a Tropical Island. Hello again. Thoughtseizes or Duress would be a nice draw here. An Abrupt Decay. Play this out. We will cast a Sylvan Scrying. Now, do we cast a Sylvan Scrying? Our opponent's got 7 cards in hand and hasn't been playing anything. Now, we're going to play out this Hexmage. Our opponent hasn't shown us any red mana just yet, and I just don't want our Sylvan Scrying to get hit by a counterspell, because it's going to be harder for us to find our Dark Depths. So if we can find a way of punching through with a Thoughtseize Duress type effect, we do have 8 of them in the deck right now, that would be nice. Now, they can just bolt our Hexmage now. Yep, so they got Volcanic Island. Have they kept bolts in? They have. Oh no, they're thinking about it. Sure. So that has taken away half of our combo. But we're trying to use it to bait counter spells because this game is going slowly. Our opponent's clearly adopted a controlling position. I think this is the turn. Do we have to go for it? What are we doing if we don't do that is the question. I guess we can hold up the Abrupt Decay. I think we're going to go for the Sylvan Scrying here. Right, it resolved. We're not going to play out this Dark Depths though. There is an option to play out the Sejiri Steppe. Just so we have more total mana to work with. I think we're going to do that. This does tap for black as well because of the Urborg. Deeproot Wayfinder. Sure, so this can rebuy Wastelands. Another reason why Leyline is going to be good in this matchup. Not of this world. We're going to play out the Dark Depths. We're going to play out a second Pithing Needle on Wasteland. This way, if they bounce the first, they can't just Wasteland our Dark Depths out from underneath us. In our opponent's beginning of combat phase, we're going to kill this. We don't want our opponent getting any surveils, so black mana, green mana. Say no. So yeah, we're slowing this game down a bit, but sometimes you have to slow the game down. Sometimes you have to go fast depending on how your opponent's sideboarding. Alright, so you have a Duress for the turn we go looking for our thing. We're on the slow boat to removing ice counters. But we'll save the Duress for when we want to punch a hole to make sure we can resolve something. It's going to be a Brazen Borrower, just as a 3-1. Sure, I don't hate that. It's probably like a 6-turn clock because the Lightning Bolt is probably going to materialize before it's done. Let's remove an ice counter. An Abrupt Decay. Alright. We're going to continue on the slow boat to Marillage. Let's just get rid of this. You've got follow-up threat. Another one of those. Sure. So we use some ice counters. So this one is a slower threat. And the Surveil is a little bit annoying because it gives them like a little bit way of digging into their deck. But I think that's okay. So we can play this one out. And now we have 2 counters removing a turn. So in 4 turns we get a 20-20. And in 4 turns we will take 8 damage. So at the moment we are winning this race. Which is a weird thing to say given the things that are in play. Sure, so I'm going to Surveil here. We might get to see some cards in their deck. I'm not particularly a big fan of this. It's a 2-3. Doesn't seem the best. This is basically drawing them a card though, which is okay. Alright. Let's remove a counter. Let's remove a counter. I don't want to give my opponent a chance to stifle this Verdant Catacombs until we need the green mana necessarily. Because I'm quite happy to tap this for black. Do we care about these Thoughtseize and Duresses right now? I don't think so. We're just on the paying 3 clock. What a weird game this is. So our opponent gets to scry and potentially draw a card off with this Delta here. It's effectively like drawing a card. It seems better in matchups like this where I'm not really going to have anything on the board to contest this. Move a counter. Move a counter. And the slog continues. So now we have a crop rotation. We will cast a Duress on our opponent. A minor misstep, sure. We'll now cast a Thoughtseize on our opponent. They are representing hard cast Force of Will here. A hard cast Force of Will. Interesting. Let's crop rotate this. They can't play a misstep now. They'd have to do a pitch cast Force of Will for this. Right, so we have Thespian stage. We have 2 Not of This World. Our creature should probably survive. Honestly don't care about this guy. We can just take the 2 here. We have 2 counter spells for what our opponent's doing. And we can play one of them around a daze. We can stifle this trigger. But it will go back on the stack immediately. Alright. Do you have a Petty Theft? Run afoul. That is not one we get to counter with this. Alright. That's good to know about. Verdant Catacombs. Sure. Alright. So that run afoul would hit our guy before we go to block this anyway. So it doesn't really prevent us any damage trying to block this. If they have a removal for our guy, we don't get to prevent damage by making it and blocking it. All we do is open ourselves up to a sorcery speed answer, which is unlikely to exist in our opponent's deck, but certainly possible. Went through a lot of ways to try and get through here, but sadly isn't the one. Right, let's Bojuka Bog. I'm glad they've got this guy, not a Tarmogoyf, because otherwise the game would have been over a long time ago. So if we crack one of these fetches, it does change the clock. So the marginal thinning you get off it isn't worth the clock we get one whole draw step, which is way more than the percentage you get from cracking it. So we do need to find something though. They left a card on top, not ideal. A Vampire Hexmage. I think we're supposed to hold this back until the turn we need it. It might be needed as a chump blocker, but we'll see. We're not going to be pressuring our opponent's life total, and it doesn't do very well in combat against what our opponent's bringing. So we're just going to slowly get beaten down by this bad guy. Not a fan of this guy. I think this is pretty much the best case scenario you can get for Deep-Root Wraithfinder. A lot of the time it's just going to get sandbagged by most creatures, not really going to be able to attack profitably. Or just get lightning bolted in the face. There's a lot of ways it can go wrong with this. Alright. What do we got? A Duress. I guess we Duress them now in case I have a lightning bolt, because then we know we have to play the Dark Depths, the Vampire Hexmage to block with. Because they bolt us in response here. Feels like that's what's about to happen. There's a lightning bolt, sure. So we have to make our Hexmage to chump block. What have we got here? I don't think we're beating this, do we? I think we can just concede this one. Alright, run afoul. That's why we've got all these removal spells in. The Not of This World doesn't look great here, does it? Would we rather have some fast mana? But we know they have Brazen Borrow in their deck. So I don't hate having this Not of This World as a thing we can do. I think we're just going to resubmit. I think our deck is alright here. They've got the run afoul, which you don't see out of the Blue-Red Delver, obviously, so they have more tools. Yes, I would like to be on the plays, how we like to play games of Magic. Alright, this is pretty darn good. So we can keep this. We can Urborg into Pithing Needle on Wasteland. And then we can Duress next turn. What I'd really like to do is draw one of those Lotus Petals. Leyline in the Void. It's not really the one, is it? Let's Duress our opponent now. See what they're working with. They can Brainstorm to protect stuff here. This gives us more outs for next turn, being able to cast this around the days. So they could be hiding a run afoul here, which we just sort of have to play around a little bit, which isn't easy. What do we have here? Daze, Lightning Bolt, Stifle. Not really a fan of these things. And we got a Wasteland over there. Tough. A tough one. I think we'll take a Daze. We can work through some of the other stuff. There's a Wasteland. There's this this guy. We're not going to play into the Daze. We didn't play our Dark Depths out last turn either. It's going to take 2 here. That's not a problem. How bad is the Scrying going to be for us? Not a great one. So we can play out the Hexmage at the cost of our second Dark Depths. And then we have to hold up and play around both Stifle and Lightning Bolt. So I don't think that's worth doing. I think our opponent's hand is really good and ours is drawn pretty horribly. We've drawn 3 blanks. 3 worst cards on our deck. Not really where I want to be here. Our opponent's doing some more wayfinding. Alright, they don't get to draw a card this turn. They just get this Nimble Mongoose. They haven't shown us any red mana yet. A Lotus Petal. This lets us play around a Daze. But our opponent does still have a whole bunch of other cards going on. Black, black. Let's try this. Now we know our opponent has a Stifle, so they have to keep that Stifle up at all times. But if they go to Lightning Bolt our guy, we can make a thing. And that gives us a 2-for-1. Alright, so there's the Lightning Bolt. So this is the red mana for Lightning Bolt. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so they're not attacking with the Mongoose because it would just get eaten up by the first strike on the Hexmage. A Thoughtseize. I will take a Thoughtseize, please. I imagine this prompts some action from our opponent. If they Lightning Bolt our guy, we do activate on this, which will force the Stifle out of our opponent's hand. A Braid on the Pithing Needle. Yeah, our opponent's got some amount of the things there, haven't they? But that's their only red source. So we have to let that go. If they Wasteland this, we can Hexmage in response. So we kind of have to take... if we take the Stifle, then they can just untap and Lightning Bolt our guy. We're in a bit of a bind here. If we take... So Basically, two options here are the Lightning Bolt or the Stifle. If we take the Stifle, then they can Lightning Bolt our guy, and then we sack the guy for the Dark Depths, and then they Wasteland, and then we got nothing. Or... this is tough, isn't it? I think we have to take the Lightning Bolt and force them to Stifle. I think 4 cards now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we take the Lightning Bolt and we force them to Wasteland our Dark Depths. So take the Lightning Bolt. So do this. Then we do this. We get the Stifle out of our opponent's hand. Do you want to trade Hexmage for Stifle? How important is it for us to get the Stifle out of our opponent's hand? No. We let this go. And then we have another Dark Depths. And we can hopefully punch through and take the Stifle that way. Our opponent's hand has been pretty good. I really like the Rug Delver deck. Sure. Not a fan of the Deep Root Wayfinder though. I think it's one of those cards where when it's good it's great, but when it's average it's unplayable. But obviously we're making it look very good right now. Sure. So they're rebuying Wastelands here. And a Mongoose. It's going to be tough out there. So we're just going to get Wastelanded every turn here. Unless we can somehow stick this Leyline, which seems unlikely. Interesting. We kind of need to keep playing lands. But we just kind of get killed by this Wasteland machine because our opponent had the Abrade as well. Yeah. Bit awkward. We're just going to get beaten by nice techie sideboard cards while we drew our sideboard cards way too late. We'll float to green. Okay, so this turns the Nimble Mongoose on, which is not really what we want. So this is 8 damage. I think we're just going to die here. They're going to get the Wasteland back tapped. Probably going to draw another Leyline this turn, I reckon. A basic Swamp. Close Dark Depths. We're just dead here. Even if we make the 2020, they can attack around it. Yeah, we just kind of got blown out by our opponent's really good draws there. So, like, they had a very select section of cards that mess it. So they had the trifecta of Lightning Bolt, Stifle, and Wasteland after having the Abrade to blow up our Pithing Needle. So they had those 3 cards. I can play around 2 of those cards a little, if you know, because we got the Duress and stuff, and we can get through it. But we can't play around 3 of them, and we just kind of got a bit ruined that way. Sometimes happens. We're having a pretty rough league today. This is probably, I think this is the worst league I've played with Green-Black Depths, actually. Not great. Let's go to the final round. So our opening hand doesn't have access to a Dark Depths. It's got a lot of decent other stuff in it, but I think we have to mulligan it. This one does have access to a Dark Depths. This has the Dream Curve, basically. This all comes undone with a Thoughtseizes, though. But, not with, well, a Thoughtseizes can definitely undo it, or a Wasteland. Curse Catcher. Alright. Let's see. I probably don't have that many cards left. Oh, they're sacrificing their Curse Catcher. Hope they don't have a Wasteland. Not a Wasteland. We're going to see another Curse Catcher. This does not counter a Marit Lage. We can just get the Thoughtseize off and play safe here. I think I'm going to play a little bit safer here. Master of the Pearl Trident and a Dismember. We don't really care about the Dismember. So we could have won that turn. But that's fine. We can win next turn. I haven't seen Merfolk for a hot minute. There's an island and a Lord of Atlantis. So we have perfect information that we're going to be able to win the game. That's nice. We know both of our opponent's cards. We're just going to do this now. It doesn't matter if we do it now or in our opponent's upkeep. So, we have Not of This World, and we have a crop rotation for Sejiri Steppe. So we have 2 layers of protection here. Now, one of them does get snagged by the... Well, one of them will get snagged by the Curse Catcher. Ether Vial. Okay, that doesn't do anything here. It's going to get bashed for 20. We also have the ability to go and get Dark Depths and get a Vampire Hexmage here. We know they've got Dismember in hand. This doesn't really save them. Oh, I've got the Urborg, haven't I? Yeah, that's fine. Sure, we can take 15 there. And we don't really need to do anything here. Our opponent's only got 4 damage. I do sometimes forget my Urborg helps our opponents out, if I'm being honest. But again, we have it so protected there that we're fine. We don't care. We could have just immediately won the game that turn instead, which is probably just the correct thing to do there. But it's not even necessary, to be honest. So, what is our opponent going to have? They might have some bounce spells. I think Abrupt Decay is going to be able to buy us a decent chunk of time. I think the Duress is okay here. Not of this world. Probably isn't where it would be. Did Merfolk decks play Wasteland? I don't know. Let's just have a little Google. Google tells me they do run Wastelands. Good to know. So, the Bojuka Bog isn't going to be doing anything here, so we can cut that one. And then we're probably looking at cutting a Not of This World. We'll probably get rid of 2 of those. And then maybe trim on one of our pieces. I think the Elvish Spirit Guide is slightly better here because it's a surprise. I think this is fine. We could take out one of the Not of This World for the last Duress though. But I think we're going to leave it like this. Because they could have some amount of like Echoing Truth bounce spell type shenanigans that we want to try and get above. We have Disruption here. We do have our Dark Depths. This means we're drawing to 12. There's something. No, we're drawing to 4 Hexmage, 4 Thespian Stage, and the 8 thing. So we're drawing to 16 cards here. So I think we can keep this one, and we can begin the game on a basic swamp. Our opponent's mulligan to 5 cards. So we're going to Thoughtseize first, because that can hit a threat. It's going to be a Curse Catcher. No turn 1 play. I like how we're set up. Now we can just fail here, right? We have a non-zero fail rate, where we just don't draw the thing. But statistically speaking, we should be okay. We'll get the swamp. Have a little Thoughtseize. Let's have a little read. Darren Hex Catcher. Other Merfolk you control. Sacrifice creature. Okay, so we're going to get rid of this because the Silvergill Adept means they have to draw another Merfolk to stick the Silvergill Adept into play. Otherwise it costs more. And we can just hit it on the next turn. Ether Vial, sure. We don't care about that. So I think we're going to go Thoughtseize, take that Curse Catcher here. Oh, not the Curse, sorry, the Silvergill Adept. Oop. Leave him with just a Dismember. Then we can play out our Boseiju and play out this Pithing Needle on Wasteland. Now, this is the point of the game where we hold back our Duress for a turn we're going off. We've basically stopped our opponent from having any sort of inroads into this game, and we're just waiting to draw one of our 16 payoffs. That is not one of the 16 payoffs. We will play this out, so if we draw the Thespian Stage, it goes off, and we can also do that with a Duress. Sure. Their Ether Vial is ticking up, so they can start dumping Laws into play if they draw them. Tide Shaper. What does this do? When Tide Shaper enters the battlefield, target land becomes an island. Is that just an island, right? Or is this still going to be a Dark Depths? It is just a Dark Depths. It's just an island. Alright. Interesting. We do have a second Dark Depths if we need it though, so it's not really what we want. We'll dram out this Urborg though. This will make their Dismember hard castable again, but we don't really care about that. We're just trying to draw one of our 16 payoffs. This is going to be a Lord probably, and do a little more damage. So this lets them Curse Catcher. A Vampire Hexmage. This is one of our payoffs that they can't Curse Catcher. We will begin the turn with a Duress to see what the other card in our opponent's hand is. It is a Wasteland and we have shut off. Okay. We will tap this for black. Tap this for black. Deploy a Hexmage. This won't work with the Dark Depths, but it will work with this one. And we pass to our opponent's turn. We're not really worried about a Wasteland here. We can't really block and do anything here. I'm trying to think of how we lose this game. We don't. Okay, so we got the win. This was a bit of a rough league. We went 2-3. One of the games we lost, like game 3 against Delver, I think it was, where our opponent had 1 card left in hand and we needed it to not be a Daze or a Surgical. And they had the second Surgical and got us. And they hadn't done any brainstorm or pondering because they just had it all already. And sometimes that happens. It's possible to play right and still lose. And that's magic. And that's fine because sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works for your opponent. And that's what makes the game interesting, in my opinion. So that one was a bit unfortunate. And then the rug match we lost was a real problem one where they had so many points of interaction that they kind of just cornered us. Like if they hadn't have had the Abrade, we might have been able to weasel our way out of it. But they had the Abrade, the Stifle, the Lightning Bolt, the Wasteland. So they had it all really. So that sometimes happens. Let's chat about the deck. So today we didn't have a lot of use of Not of This World. We had a lot of decks that just kind of ignored it. There's been quite an uptick in sort of like white DIDDLY control decks, where Not of This World is actually pretty good because you can get rid of one of their few pieces of interactions like the Swords to Plowshares or whatever. But we just didn't play against those today. So the flex slot from what I have at the moment in this deck is, so normally I would run 4 Pithing Needle, 4 Not of This World. So the 4th Not of This World and the 4th Pithing Needle, these are the usual flex slots. So today we flexed not the Pithing Needle into a Duress, but we would have been better off flexing Not of This World just because of the matchups we played, and just giving us 4 more needles so we have more wasteland protection. But that's just how it goes sometimes. Some people will say that the third copies of both Not of This World and Pithing Needle are also flex slots. I'm less convinced about that one, but I think it's possible. You can flex one of them. So you kind of have maybe 3 slots that you can play with in this main deck, but I think the rest is fine. Sometimes you're not going to get there, like today, but that's Magic the Gathering for you, right? I'm pretty happy with this build still. The sideboard, again, is fine. Now, there is an option. If there's going to be a big uptick in people running Surgical Extraction, then you can replace these Leylines with your own Surgical Extractions. And then bring in Surgical Extractions for matchups like that Delver one, for example, where you want to hit their Wastelands with it sometimes, or just use it as a way of clearing out the counter spells or whatever you want, as well as protecting your Dark Depths with it. So you can protect your own Dark Depths with the Leyline. Sorry, not the Leyline, the Surgical, because they Surgical you, in response, you Surgical it yourself and just take that one Dark Depths out, which is a reasonable option. So that's a thing you can think about in terms of the sideboard. I still think Leyline, especially for playing online, I think Leyline is really, really important at the moment because there's a lot of Reanimator players. We did get bodied by one of them because that's what Reanimator can do sometimes. But I think Leyline is where you want to be rather than Surgical, because against Reanimator, all that happens is they unmask or grief or Thoughtseize away your interaction spell and then go off. Whereas Leyline, they can't do that. They have to deal with it and then go off. Now, that's not to say they don't have a chance of dealing with it, because they've got Wear Tears and Serenities and things. But I think that's just more likely to buy you more turns. Sometimes you will get jammed up if your first sort of salvo fails and you're just left drawing a load of Leylines. That's happened to us in a couple of games. Then, yeah, you're going to lose games sometimes to it. But I think the games you win off of the Leyline is better. Maybe there's an argument for not bringing in the Leylines in the Delver matchup like we did. But as we saw, they had the little guy that regrows Wasteland. Now, that's not normally a problem if you've got Pithing Needles, but again, if they draw their Abrade, and they kind of stuff you a little bit, and they might have had Murktides, whereas if we'd have just got the Leyline in play, they wouldn't have been able to do any of that, and we would have been all right. Unfortunately, we did draw like 2 of the Leylines and 2 of the Not of This Worlds that weren't great there. But that's about it. So I know it's a long way out, obviously, but Legacy doesn't change really rapidly as a format. But in September, I'm going to the European Legacy Masters. I qualified for that tournament. And this is one of the decks I would consider playing. Now, there's a long time between now and then, which is why I'm playing this deck regularly on my channel, as well as the Mono White Painter set that I'm very fond of. So you're going to be seeing this deck probably every 2 weeks on my channel because, you know, I love this channel. I'm writing a big... I love this deck, and I'm writing a big primer for this deck that's going to be on a Patreon soon. So I hope you like watching Marit Lage. All right, before I sign off, like, comment, subscribe if you're still here. Let me know what you think of this deck. Let me know what you think about the sideboard options, about Surgical versus Leyline. I'd be curious to see your thoughts. Also, become a member of the channel, join the Patreon, join the Discord. It doesn't cost you anything to join the Discord, so come say hi. You can ask various questions. All right, I think we're done for today. So thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.